Well, good. We've got it. Don't feel like you just joined a staff meeting, um, an MB Foundation staff meeting. But I think many are familiar faces, but I'm actually going to start by taking a moment to do some introductions. And if more jump on board, that's fine. I'll keep trying to pay attention here to the those that are in the waiting room and need to be let in. But thanks for being a part of this. We want to talk about increasing our impact through generosity. It was requested that we basically cover the same material that we did at the U.S. conference workshop. So somebody must have carried back a good word. If that was one of you, then you might want to sign off because you've already heard it, or stay engaged and interact. I'd love for this to be more conversational. We're a small enough group that we can be conversational. So especially to my team members, Nate, Marlon, if you see something in chat that I don't notice from someone, please bring that to my attention or just throw it out. So you might want to mute your mic, but feel free to unmute at any time and speak up and interrupt. And again, we're a small enough group that we can handle that. But unmuting or muting eliminates some of the interference that we can sometimes get. So that's the topic. But before we jump into that, a couple of just housekeeping since MB Foundation has the floor. My name is Jon Wiebe. I'm president of MB Foundation. I think you all are aware of that, so not anything else that needs to be said. Andy and Garvey, you might give a little wave, although they see your names. And they are also familiar faces to those of you in the Central District. Grateful that they're right down the hallway from me and engaged virtually. Normally we would be there together, so we're already been reminiscing about some of the stops we would sometimes make together. I can't remember the names of every place, but I do remember some of the food. So anyway, we're here together in this way. Some new faces who are actually going to participate a little bit in this presentation or teaching. Nate Yoder. Nate is in Fresno, California. He's in his home, but he's also part of our Fresno office. Just started in September as Chief Development Officer. So Nate has a national leadership role in new product service developments as well as in new relationship developments and just helping to bring our ministry to you. So if there's anything that he can help you with, he's ready to do that. He most recently served in the church many years, served in district leadership within other denominations within our Anabaptist family, and most recently was West Coast MCC Executive Director. So he was already living in Fresno, and he can tell you more of his journey if you want to dialogue with him later, and he'd be happy to do that. And then Marlon Hyatt, he's not in Fresno, although he's in our Fresno office when he's at the office, but I think he's at his home in Kingsburg. See if I got that right. He's nodding his head, yes. So Marlon's also here to serve you nationally. So he's here to serve you in the Central District. His role is Church Relations Director. And we're still trying to figure out what that means, so bear with us. But what we do know is that we want to do even a better job of serving the local church. And we believe we've been doing an okay job. Feel free to weigh in on that if you feel differently. We welcome your feedback, but we think we've done all right, but we want to do better and lean in even more. So there's services and ministry that is available that's more focused on the pastor. And many of you are pastors or church leadership, or is targeted to the church to help come alongside and help you complete your ministry at the local church. And so if any of that resonates, feel free to visit with Marlon, and we'll show some contact information. You can find it on our website as well, and access it that way. So we're still kind of figuring that out, and he'll share some things here in a little bit and give you more context for some of his work. Hopefully you're seeing now the slides and the PowerPoint. How are we doing? Somebody give me a thumbs up. All right, good. Also want to direct you to our now I have more to manage. So I don't know if someone's in the chat room or a chat right now. So Nate or Marlon, if you can make sure you're looking at that, that would be helpful. One other thing to point out, if you haven't seen it, I'd invite you to check out the videos that we prepared. They're a little homespun, but I think they're still helpful. So there's a report from MB Foundation on the Central District website, 4 or 5 minutes, and give a few highlights of things over the last year. And also a testimony. So if you're engaged in our certificate program, which I know many of your churches are, certainly the district is, some of you personally are, you'll be interested in a story that Bruce Jost put out there about some recent events as we came alongside Lighthouse Church in Denver, Colorado, and just a unique circumstance that as we lent money to help them accomplish the ministry and vision that God had put on their heart, it also benefited really 3 other ministries. And so you have to hear it to understand it, but it's kind of a unique story, one of a kind. So I invite you to take a look at that. Anyone have a question or comment? Feel free to jump in. Hearing none, seeing none, we'll continue. We'll jump into the workshop here a little bit. Again, thanks for coming. A few stats here about kind of the charitable giving landscape. But as I talk about impact, increasing our impact through generosity, I think we can have 2 lenses as we look at this, as we think about it. And in your local church context, the district context, you might be thinking about this. I would urge you to think about it in both of these, not just gravitate towards one or the other, especially not towards the first one that I'm actually highlighting here, which is the reality that it could be difficult. It is difficult for some of our churches to raise resources to have the revenue coming in that we would like to see during this pandemic. Excuse me while I admit, welcome Mike Wall, glad to have you. And so it could just be a challenging time. Some of our churches are finding it's not challenging from a revenue standpoint. Praise the Lord. Other churches are really seeing a decline, a drastic decline even in giving. And we've been doing some surveys. We'll share some of that information as we go along. And there's also some national surveys that I'm sure you've been seeing. There we go. I got my chat room up. So there's also some national information I'm sure you've been reading as well as I have that, it's a no-brainer to know that generosity is going to be challenged during this pandemic. But I don't want you to have that as your only lens coming into this conversation. And before I get into the next lens, I do want to highlight this quote. I think this really resonates with something that Rick Eschbach said already this morning about how we all, the local church, our ministry, Central District Conference, MB Foundation, we all need to be innovative, thinking about new ways of ministry, because we've never needed godly kingdom building ministry like we do today. Amen. We've got so many societal pressures right now, from the pandemic to the societal unrest and racism and the election. I mean, that stuff's going to drag on. It's weighing us down. The only hope is the hope of Christ to really counteract against all of this. And we all have our own opinions about this stuff, but really coming back to the gospel, back to the Bible, the world needs us. The world needs Christ, and we are the vessel for that. And so we need to be innovative. Don't grow weary of doing what is good. Keep leaning in. And if there's some way we can help you, we've got new people, new resources to come alongside you in ways that we can. So I just want to encourage you and challenge you to keep being innovative, keep leaning in, don't lose heart, and see what can be done for kingdom's sake. I just bumped my PowerPoint a little early, but I want to say that the second lens we need to be looking at this issue from is that not just that our revenue might be down, and so we want to talk about generosity, but this area that the world needs ministry like never before. And resources, financial resources, human resources are the way the ministry happens. And so we need to continue to encourage generosity, even during a pandemic, so that the work of God can be funded and can even increase. And so be thinking about that even if your resources are okay, church revenue is in a sustaining mode, maybe this is still a time to lean into increasing generosity so that there can be increased impact for the kingdom's sake. Might be a good time just to mention, you can make note, you can send me an email, I can direct you to it, but this information is on our website. So if you go to MB Foundation, maybe one of my team members can type that in the chat, the address, mbfoundation.com/championing stewardship. And the first item that will come up that's a link is this item of increasing our impact through generosity. And there you'll find the PowerPoint that I'm sharing. You'll also find a paper that I'm really going to be speaking through, the 7 attributes of a generous church. And I think it's a great tool for the local church. So I hope you pick up that white paper and take a look at it, and then a discussion guide for that white paper. And we'll kind of circle back as to some ideas of ways that you can use that resource. So I want that to be in front of you. So we want to talk about this paper, 7 attributes of a generous church, and see if it's helpful to you as you lead your church to increase in generosity. This material, just as an encouragement to you, it's an encouragement to me, is being used all across Eurasia to train church leaders. This very paper, and I don't say that to draw attention to MB Foundation, but they are hungry to know how to increase impact through generosity. And this tool is becoming part of the church's resource, and we've been able to make that available to them. Thank you, Nate, for getting that on there. Perfect. So you can find a link in the chat room. So it's helpful to them. I hope it's helpful to you. Again, we're going to unpack it a little bit and take questions and your comments, and then close with a new resource that we're making available to you that Marlon will share about. So real quickly, 7 attributes of a generous church as outlined in that paper that you can find there on our website. Number 1, generous churches are led by generous leaders. This may seem like a no-brainer, but it needs to be said, okay? And it needs to be evaluated and practiced. You are all leaders, paid, volunteer, but leaders in your local church. And so it begs the question, how are you doing in your generosity? And the same question, I believe, needs to be asked of all of our leadership. How are we doing in our generosity? And maybe studying this material in its leadership will help you embrace that question and answer it honestly. 2 Corinthians 8:7 says that we need to excel in this grace of giving. And so that's a challenge to you. It's a challenge to me. I'm a leader for our stewardship efforts nationally. How am I doing excelling in this grace of giving? It's something that I wrestle with. I hope it's something that you wrestle with. We can't take people where we aren't going. And you've all counseled people in different ways, and it can be a challenge when someone comes to you with a weakness, with a spiritual blind spot that happens to be your blind spot as well, or your weakness as well, and all of a sudden you're in a place where it's hard to help them, right? Because you need help and you're struggling, and so generosity is one of these issues that we need to wrestle with as leaders. Not to feel guilty, not to feel obligation and duty, but to grow, to move along on our spiritual journey. So it might be that this is a way for you to just positively study this white paper and study this paper, 7 attributes of a generous church, as a leadership group, as an elders, as a staff team, and just begin to have a dialogue about it and see if that doesn't promote more increased stewardship among your leadership. And then you'll be in a better position to take your congregation towards a greater level of generosity. Yeah, number 2, 7 attributes of a generous church. Generous churches, so now we're just kind of looking at the whole congregation, generous churches have a strong vision of why their church exists and can communicate it effectively to their members. You might have generous people in your church, and they give their resources elsewhere because they don't see a vision coming from their local church. But when you get a group of generous people together and they give to the local church, it's because they see a vision that's happening at the local church. They see a church that's leaning in during the pandemic, wanting to be a solution, a provider of services to the community and throughout the world. And so their generosity begins to flood into the local church because they see the vision that's happening there. And they've heard that, and it's been communicated to them. So does that make sense? We can raise up generous people and they give it elsewhere. But if our ministry has a compelling vision and communicates it well, then people will give to that compelling vision. Some of you might be wondering, how do we even talk about generosity during this pandemic? And so I wanted to share a couple of best practices with you when it comes to this. People want to be generous. I've seen that in my church. There are people with resources, with we'd say deeper pockets, and a higher capacity to be generous, both in spirit as well as in resource. And they will sometimes ask or watch where are the needs, and they know there's needs during this pandemic, and there's some of them are waiting to be asked, others are stepping forward and looking for the opportunities. So some ideas for you if you're wondering about making the ask. Maybe your church is struggling, or maybe you just see new vision, new opportunities if the resources were there. People that want to give additional gifts during this pandemic are asking these kinds of questions. They're asking, how are you doing financially? And as a pastor or leader, you need to be able to, at least broad strokes, answer that question. They need to be able to answer, where have we made cuts? Where have we pivoted and adjusted? Because we're leaders and we don't want to, we want to respond proactively and make the adjustments necessary as we lead well. And then, they want to know, well, what are you doing that's relevant to the world today, that's relevant to the pandemic, or that's relevant to the racial stress and strain that we're experiencing, or that's relevant to the people that are hurting in our community or that need to know Jesus. And so if we come back to this, they will basically want to know, can I trust you as a leader or as a church? And do you have vision that you'll use the resources that we would bless you with wisely? So those are things that we need to be ready to address. And if we're ready to address those things, then make the ask. Talk to people, take them out for coffee, share your vision. You've got their trust as a pastor or leader, and be able to be ready to answer these questions. Don't be offended by them, and just lean in and know their heart and invite them to participate. Any questions or comments about that? Feel free to chat. Welcome. We've had a couple more people join us. With that, I'm going to ask, again, you can feel free to join in and make a comment, but Nate is going to share a couple of these attributes, and we'll keep moving.
Okay, third attribute of a generous church. Generous churches have a strong external focus to make a difference in their community and the world that is reflected in their budget. I've heard this many different places, but the really profound question of, would anyone miss your church if it was gone? We tend to think of church as Sunday morning services, and we've even felt that strongly with the COVID challenges, but it's much more than that. If the church went away, would anyone miss it? And to be able to have a budget that reflects reaching out to your community, reaching out around the world, having that as a modeling, a first fruits commitment from your church budget as a way of modeling sort of corporate tithing, if you will, it just fosters generosity, even beyond the impact. It's part of creating a culture of generosity that just benefits and extends the kingdom. Number 4, generosity. Attribute number 4, generous churches teach people a holistic theology of stewardship, generosity, and the kingdom. As I think about this one, this is really kind of, how do we reinforce the why of stewardship and giving? Generosity is more than just what happens in those few minutes as the offering plate is passed. In fact, sometimes that moment of giving can actually show a lack of generosity or a lack of intentionality. You've probably experienced it, arguments and fights that happen on the way to church because someone forgot the check. And so instead of worshiping, you're kind of bugged at your spouse because they didn't bring the check. How do you get beyond that? Or the person who just pulls out their wallet as the plate comes by, looks in it and says, oh, I can give $5 this week, or I can give $20 this week. That's wonderful. Every gift is good. But how do we build upon that moment in our worship to encourage more intentionality, more reflection, more understanding of why we are giving? So just a couple of thoughts. I mean, this is is challenging in multiple ways. We're in this sort of transition time as more and more goes digitally. How do you encourage this intentionality through digital giving? But I think we need to emphasize giving as worship. So I still remember when I started probably 12 years ago, I was pastoring at the time, and we started having direct deposit giving. I could set a certain amount in advance and it would just disappear out of my checking every week. It was wonderful because I had enough details to worry about on a Sunday morning that I didn't have to worry about forgetting the check. It was just done. But I felt this, I'm not putting anything in the plate as it goes by. And, I'm the pastor. How do I still model this if people never see me giving? So in reality, I was being as intentional or more, but it was different. So how do we just help people with all those possibilities that are happening? So for digital giving, I would encourage churches to be clear and to ask about it. In your digital service, take a moment to pause, to ask people. Some churches have created cards or sort of, their offering receipt, if you will, or like maybe as you could say, like, so checkbooks used to have duplicate checks. You could mail the one check and you had the carbon copy. Is almost like that idea. The person who had signed up or was doing their online giving could still put a card in the offering plate as it went by, just as a way of still participating in that type of online or that type of live worship. So those are just various ways, just two examples. How do you, even if you don't have online giving, how do you not just have the offering just happen as part of the service, but how do you even create, even if it's 30 seconds before, to pause, to encourage, to highlight gratitude? So it's not just something rote that happens, but it always points back to the why, that we are serving and following a generous God. Some churches have done a giving moment where someone testifies about the benefit of someone's generosity, or there's a brief testimony from a ministry or a missionary that you support. And I mean, if we would take a moment to brainstorm, we could come up with lots of other ideas. But the point is here, part of teaching a holistic theology of stewardship, it goes beyond a stewardship sermon or sermon series once a year. It can be reinforced and incorporated week in, week out, to just reinforce it as we go along.
Hey, Nate.
Yeah.
I would love to, since we're a small enough group, if one or two would share it, because I really struggle with this, and I realize that during the pandemic, I'm more sensitive than I used to be to our need to move to online giving, to other methods of giving, not just because of a younger generation, but because of a very real and practical problem right now of churches not meeting or not wanting to pass the offering plate, so to speak, and those kinds of challenges. And so offering can dip, or we don't know how to talk about the offering. So a couple of questions I'd have is from, we've got 5 or 6 churches on board here. Were you offering online giving before the pandemic? Did you add it during the pandemic? Are you going to continue it after the pandemic? And so any of that would be helpful, just anecdotally. And then secondly, if you're doing a lot of online giving, how are you helping them continue to experience giving as worship, as opposed to just a discipline I do electronically, just like I set up my utility bill payment or my mortgage payment, and I never think about it again? Any comments about any of that from our participants? I'd love it if we can take a minute.
Yeah, so we had set up the online giving and text giving. We've had it for probably about 3 years now, and we had probably about maybe 7 to 9 families that were using it before the pandemic. We have 17 families that are using it regularly now. So I think that's been very helpful. Also, when we went online, what we did is instead of live streaming everything actually live, we recorded it and edited it, and so I could put up the numbers during the service there, and pause and just let people know that this is where you can text and there's where you can give. And when we came back and met in person, one of the guys who was on the worship team took that opportunity as we had the offering being received that morning, and just talked about how it really got him into a time of actually reflecting and thinking about it as he was giving, and he could do that right there. So it was a good testimony.
That's a great story, Scott. Thanks. Kind of captures all that we're talking about here. Anyone else?
We started online giving. I'm from Lincoln Hills, Sioux Falls. We started online giving when we started live streaming our service, and we have about the same number of what Scott is talking about, somewhere around there, a dozen or so regularly giving through that. But interesting thing is we have somebody giving to our church that we have absolutely no idea who they are, from the state of Washington, that somehow or another they must be watching the service. We have no way of tracking that. Plus, the live streaming we have a number of people who moved away because of employment, and they are now logging into our service every morning. One of them being my daughter and son-in-law from Juneau, Alaska. But several other states. We also have people logging in that are family members who are not believers and are enjoying our services. So, yeah, you don't know. You know, we made the investment right away. We decided to do it as well as we could, and we continue to improve it to make it better. And I think that's helped as well, because if you do a crummy live stream, people aren't going to stick with it. They're going to leave it. But we continue to gain people, and it's interesting. Who'd have ever thought? So from that standpoint, I think the pandemic has been a blessing to the church. And our giving in our church has not dropped at all through the whole pandemic.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that story. So just one other thing maybe on this encouraging a culture of generosity. We've been talking here just about kind of online and Sunday morning. I just make a comment as well about just the budget process. I think I have seen this again and again. I've been guilty of this as a pastor. It's easy to communicate about the budget rather than about the ministry beyond the budget. And so even as you're, I've seen churches, life gets busy and there's a lot going on, and suddenly we have a shortfall, and suddenly we say, hey, please give, we're not meeting our budget. Well, that's budget's important, but how do you refocus on the point of the budget, which is to foster ministry? So I just encourage any way you can and foster stewardship by focusing on, increased giving lets us meet our ministry goals. When you do your annual budget presentation at the annual meeting, I remember someone years ago said to me, how do you make your budget a vision statement? How do you point out this is what we're trying to do, rather than just, oh, well, our budget's only going out 3% this year. That didn't say anything about ministry. That just said we're not spending too much. So just another sort of piece, and not Sunday morning, but more broadly, how do you even use that annual process to reinforce generosity and vision? Let's go on. Number 5, generous churches. Attributes of generous churches. Generous churches provide discipleship environment for people to work out the art and science of stewardship and generosity. So if what we just talked about was sort of the reinforcing the why of how we give, this is a little bit more of the how. There's no one way that people give. We've already talked quite a bit about online giving, but let me just talk a little bit as well about how do you encourage people at different stages of life, different economic conditions to give. if all of our testimonies are people who, to use the term John did earlier, have deep pockets, what about the person that's struggling? How do you encourage and celebrate those who give what they can? How do you encourage teens? Is your youth ministry encouraging teenagers to start giving? I know churches have used, what about children? I know some churches have found a way to really engage children is to use matching gifts. So for example, what if you engage your children to say, hey, we want to help dig a well somewhere in a needy place. And you get people in your church to provide matching gifts. So any dollars that the children bring in, someone else will match it. And I know churches then that have a match to a match. So it ends up, every dollar that the children bring in ends up being matched up to 4 times. And that just starts to help encourage everyone to give. And it also creates this culture of generosity. So I'd encourage you to explore with those sort of things. What about planned giving? How do you encourage people to include your church in your will? People at different stages of life obviously have a greater need for this. And let's be honest, you expected MB Foundation to mention planned giving. That's what we do, but it really is significant. 90% of the wealth in the US is in non-cash assets, and planned giving helps tap into that. And not only does it benefit your church, it enables people to give in a way that they often didn't even imagine, which is joyful to them. And we talked already, and you already are doing this, embrace digital giving in the forms that are appropriate. We've heard stories of online. Digital giving sometimes helps people to give regularly and get beyond just that, oh, what's in my wallet this week? And actually, digital givers tend to give more. There was a study recently that said the average online giver gives $17 per week versus the average giver who gives 10 in the offering that goes by, and they're also much more likely to stay engaged. So just a couple ideas about how you help many people to engage in multiple ways of giving. One final thought on this: the last church I was pastoring, we started to do some digital giving, and kind of the tipping point, if you will, was when we realized that many of the young adults and young couples under 30, they had checking accounts, but they didn't actually have checks. They just used their debit card to access money out of the account. And so we realized if we don't allow digital giving, we're actually making it challenging for them to give. And so how do we remove those barriers to foster, and digital giving can do that. John, back to you, I think, for the next one.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Nate. Again, people just jump in on the chat or unmute and interrupt. We'll figure it out. We just want this to be interactive. So 2 more attributes that are noted in the paper, and you can read more about them there. But this number 6 comes pretty easy for our churches for a couple of reasons. One, most of our churches are small to medium size, and so we seek active engagement from people. And then as MBs, it's very Anabaptist to talk about the priesthood of all the believers, that ministry is for everyone. And so that's the point, is as people are engaged, they tend to be more generous. And frankly, if you're familiar at all with Crown Financial Ministries, they've reported for years that as individuals get their financial house in order and they become more generous, and lo and behold, they begin to engage more in small groups or in volunteer ministry. And so it has an impact on their service beyond just their stewardship and their generosity. But the reality is, and we're seeing it more during the pandemic through some of the studies, that the churches that are seeing their revenue stay fairly consistent and not be terribly impacted by the pandemic are churches where there's a high percentage of folks that are truly engaged and mature. Okay, so I mean, this isn't really much of a surprise, but yet it's helpful to think through it, right? So it goes both ways. So if you have a high level of engagement, and you're helping people be spiritually mature, then they tend to be more generous. One affects the other, and it goes both ways. So many of you probably find yourself in that kind of a church. Some of you feasters, you would find yourself not as likely in that kind of church today, and so your challenges are different. But the sixth attribute, generous churches develop an organization culture that supports the priesthood of the believers. And number 7, generous churches steward the church finances effectively. We can't just talk about good stewardship by the individuals. We also need to model it. And so there's things that we sometimes do as churches that really go against the grain of what we're actually trying to teach our individuals. Let me give you an example that's near and dear to my heart. We have too many churches that discontinue or their first fruits giving, their missionary support, their support to the local food bank, these different kinds of things that are external only get funded after their basic budget gets funded. And so it kind of operates as a slush fund, if you will. It's the second priority. Can you imagine if our church was full of people who treated their giving to the local church in the same way? That they gave, second to the local church instead of first fruits, that they waited till the end of the year to see if there's anything left over before they responded to ministry needs. And so we need to model in the local church what we're hoping. First of all, what's biblical, we need to model it. And then we can even use that as a teaching opportunity to help people in our church see what we're doing, see why we're doing it corporately, and then encourage them to employ that in their own lives. We've actually here's just another example. I talked about first fruits and external support. Another one would be savings and having a reserve. 65%, this came from our survey that we did in June. 65% of MB churches had cash reserves of 3 months or more prior to the crisis, and 12% had no reserves going into the pandemic. If you're a church that had some reserves, you can use this as a teaching opportunity to help people who are still more in a crisis area in terms of their stewardship and their financial management. Maybe they just live on the edge and they have lots of fun, but they're one paycheck from disaster. And maybe you can help them, not to say I told you so, but to use this as a teaching opportunity to say, hey, as we come back through, as you go back to work, as you get that next government stimulus, if there is one, or maybe there's a better way to manage those resources to keep you back from the brink in a healthier way as we move through this difficult time. So you model that as a church. You can also talk about that and teach that. Cultivate your donors, another best practice. I don't know how many of you actually that's a fairly uncommon thing at the church level, frankly. A college talks about cultivating their donors. A MB Foundation talks about cultivating their donors. What are you doing in the church to show appreciation? You make a gift during this pandemic to a parachurch ministry, and I guarantee you get thanked, and you get thanked more than once, and you get thank you notes, and you get, of course, receipts, timely receipts, and there's just a variety of communication that happens. At the local church, we struggle with that. And I know the theological issues there. I've debated them and discussed them at length, and we'd be happy to visit with you more in the local church to help you work through that. But I do think we need to, as churches, show our appreciation, show our gratitude, be timely with our appreciation. And if you're not meeting and you don't have as many things to do, or maybe your youth pastor doesn't, maybe they take a group of names of people that we know give, that the treasurer gives to them, not amounts, but just names. There won't be any surprises there, and write them thank you notes. Thank you for investing in the ministry of our church. Here's what we're doing with the youth group right now, in spite of the pandemic. These would just be good opportunities to invest in the relationship with your donors. Any other comments here? We'll pause and shift gears quite a bit. So if you have any questions or some great point to add, we'd love to hear it. Again, a reminder that this white paper and some related resources that I think will be helpful to you are available on our website, and we put that in the chat room. Any questions or comments? Well, hearing none, we're gonna shift gears. So that it's still related to impacting, increasing our impact through generosity, but it has to do with some new resources, which are really, anyone can gain access to these resources. And I don't want us to take Marlon's thunder here. He's going to explain them to you, but they're really focused on our pastors, our staff, and church leadership. And as you become better stewards and more generous as pastors and church leadership, we've just talked about it'll flow downhill, so to speak. It will impact our community. And so taking the time to invest as a pastor, as a couple, as a team, as leadership, using some of these resources will be of great benefit to growing generosity in your local church. So Marlon Hyatt is leading a new launch that we've had of this resource. Marlon, explain financial health to our friends here.
Yes, thank you. So in all of our churches, it takes all ages, and we have such diversity in age and in churches and even in our different ethnic groups. And so I heard this the other day that I just thought I wanted to share with you. This gentleman came home late one night from a business trip, and there had been a storm, and so his two children were in his place in the bed with his wife, and so he didn't know what to do. He went and spent the rest of the night in the guest room. So the next morning he has a little talk with his kids, says, it's okay if you're in there with a storm, but next time I'm coming home, it'd be nice, if you left my place. So a month or two later, he's at the airport, and his family comes to meet him at the baggage claim, and his son yells across, "Daddy, good news." So he yells back, "Yeah, what?" He said, "Nobody's slept with Mommy since you've been gone this time." And, you could just realize everybody in the airport's looking at the man and looking at the boy and then looking around wondering, oh man, where's the mom? Where's the mom? And, that's just an example of us in our churches. It depends on your perspective, depends on your experience, your age with how things are going. And so we come, like John said, hoping that healthy churches, financially healthy pastors and leaders lead to eventually very financially healthy churches. And so we have a place to start, and then we have an end goal of where we're trying to head. And so we've just rolled out this brand new financial health. It's in partnership, and that's what we want to do. We want to partner with you. We want to partner with your churches. And so we've set the example. We're partnering with different groups to bring this about. And so the main thing is that you realize, hey, it's free. And not only free, you can even get some of the grants in return on top of that. So just wanted you to see this. If you look through the websites, you'll run across this screen, and then you'll be able to go from there. So let's go to the next one and see what that says. Here's who we've partnered with. National Association of Evangelicals, and there's some really good training. That's the main thing we want, for there to always be some top-notch, excellent training available to pastors and to leaders, and then as well to churches. We've partnered with USMB. They've actually partnered with us, and they've already rolled out the Bless Your Pastor portion of this entire training segment. So you can start at any of these websites and end up at the same place, usmb.org or NAE. But here's ours that we'd love to have you come in and get started with, mbfoundation.com/financial health. And if you go there, this is what you'll find. You need to go to the portion where it says apply for the grant, and you'll find all this that we're going to talk about. So I encourage all you pastors to go there and look and see what's available. For those of you on here that are not a pastor, would you go to your pastor and encourage them to go jump in there? And maybe you can go in there and look around and see what he's going to encounter when he goes. So we're going to give you a snapshot of that here today. And the first segment is, well, the first couple of questions are going to be, are you credentialed, and what are you involved in? And then you get to this where it talks about the actual courses. In this first section, it's personal finances. You heard John say earlier, maybe you and your spouse would go through this. So the Bless Your Finances is a session with a $1,000 grant available. And then God is Your Provider is on the entire personal finance, 6 sessions long. And for that, it's $3,000 grant available, as well as NAE is going to send a $100 e-gift card on your completion of this course. So you can decide how much time, how much energy, what kind of grant you're looking for. We're offering up to $3,000. So if personal finance is your area, then maybe this 6-session one will get you the entire grant amount as well as the gift card. And so you can go in there and look at that, and then once you decide, you get started in the training. And it's really good material. It's made to be fun as well. It's made to be interactive with your spouse and even with your leadership group. So then we move over to the second area. The next question is on church generosity. And here's all the classes, the courses for this. It's Bless Your Pastor is 1 session. It's a $1,000 grant plus an NAE $250 e-gift card. And this is what is on the USMB website. So it's the same thing. The thing that the USMB website leaves off is the session of training and the $1,000 grant, but they're making it pretty easy to get this $250 e-gift card. So just some great thoughts in this training on Bless Your Pastor and encouraging pastors. And for you pastors, I think I would say this: be sure and get a lay person to promote this. It's kind of hard for you to get up there and promote yourself on this one, but so get a lay person who can understand this with you, and then let them take the lead as you go to the church on that. Then another session. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick comment to interject. It can be a little confusing because there's 2 programs provided by NAE, and we're partnering with USMB on this Bless Your Pastor piece. But you can go to USMB and easily just get the e-gift card and do the program. You have to apply for the $1,000 grant by also going to our website and applying for the grant. So once you do Bless Your Pastor, $1,000, and Marlon's going to talk about what those grants are, but the gift cards, small potatoes here. We got $1,000 for you as a grant to whichever pastor applies for it. So if you've got multiple pastors and you're a lead pastor and you want to allow your associate to apply for it, that's fine too. But one pastor in the church, if you do Bless Your Pastor, can get the $1,000 grant. Back to you, Marlon.
Yes, thank you for that input. Then there's a 40-day devotional. It's called the Generous Life Devotional. And so that there's a session on that, as well as the 40-day adventure through there. You can receive that either through email, or you can get a hard copy and go through that devotional for 40 days. But there again is another $1,000 grant possible, available. And then Bless Your Church. And you heard Nate talk and John talk about, hey, are we going further to where we're helping people realize, hey, there's more to give than just from your income. There's what you have as your possessions, and how you could make a plan to give that towards the end of life, if not at the end of life. So here's a whole bit of training on that area, and another $1,000 grant available. Or if you choose the church generosity, the 6 sessions, it includes all of these: Bless Your Pastor, the Generous Life Devotional, and the Bless Your Church. So, and then there's again the $3,000 grant available, and another e-gift card from NAE. So this is the training, and it's basically broken down into personal and church. And then when you choose your up to $3,000 grants, then here's your grant options. It can either go to start or grow your retirement account, or it could begin to be a savings where you provide for maybe an upcoming sabbatical, and those funds would be held by USMB. So we are just trying to say, hey, we want to partner. We've found some really good training. We would really hope that pastors and church leaders and pastors' spouses would take advantage of this training. And then we've partnered in getting some grants that we feel would be another great resource and be helpful to further retirement or to look for sabbatical. So that's mostly of what I wanted to share today. And I think, again, we're back to some questions or comments. We want to hear from you. It's one thing for us to say, we got great resources, why don't you guys use them? Maybe even better if you're asking for things, and then we try to find some of those helpful resources and work together on that. So we just want to partner with you, and thank you today for partnering with us here on this time together. John?
Thanks, Marlon. Great question here from Melissa. If a church leader takes the course, who does the grant go to? Let me just add to that a little bit more. Hopefully it explains it better on the website. We're just trying to do a little flyover, but great question. We're happy to dig into more details. It can be a little confusing. The idea is that the personal pastor sessions would be done by husband and wife if the pastor is married, and they're online courses, either a 1-session course or a 6-session course, and you just do those in your home over 1 hour or 6 hours approximately, and you would complete it, and then you would receive the grant. So those are available to every pastor within the church. The church, or maybe I should go back on the PowerPoint here so you remember how they're called. Church Generosity Online Training. These courses should be done by a church leadership group and involve the pastor that would receive the grant. So it could be an executive pastor, it could be a lead pastor. It really could be any of the pastors that would spearhead and say, let's do this devotional together as a church. I'm the CE director, I'm head of Christian education, and I want us to do this devotional. And so a group of church leadership, defined locally, would come together, watch the 1 session led by that pastor, whoever's kind of spearheading it, and then deliver the devotional to the whole church, and the church would go through this 40-day devotional together over a period of time. And then that pastor would receive the grant. So these are pastor grants only. Some of the pastor grants require church engagement, and some of the pastor grants can be done in the comfort of their own living room together with their spouse. So hopefully that helps. And then the funding, just to add clarity, if the pastor that receives the grant, The money will be sent right to their retirement account if possible. If not, we can send a check to the pastor with the understanding that they're going to add it to their IRA, add it to their church retirement account. If you're with Guidestone in the MB Foundation U.S. Conference Retirement Plan, we could add it directly. And then if you choose that you want the funds to be seed money for a future sabbatical, then we're distributing to the USMB so that your church can work closely with them to know when and how those funds should be dispersed. Great question. I added a little bit onto it, but a couple things that I wanted to plug as well. Any other questions about financial health?
Yeah, Nate, were you saying something?
No, I just wanted to make sure that we answered the question in the chat,
Sure.
and we did.
Yes, thank you.
I also wanted to add, just for clarity, but also I think it's important for you to know that MB Foundation has set aside $50,000, and that was a decision of our board of directors to take advantage of the opportunity presented to us by NAE. So we set aside $50,000. NAE, because the funds that they've received from Lilly Endowment matched that. So we now have a pool of money, $100,000, that are funding these grants. And so this is a significant way that we want to partner with the local church and with our local pastors in helping you individually or corporately have greater financial health and bless the pastor along the way. So it's 10:30. If you have other questions, we would be happy to entertain them, and you could just send us an email or give us a call. I think all of you know how to reach us, but there's email for myself, for Nate, for Marlon. If it's about financial health, I would specifically suggest you reach out to Marlon, but any of us can help you. As I said, it's 10:30, so thanks for being with us. We look forward to the next business session with you. I think that's at 11 o'clock. So you got a 30-minute donut run, and we'll see you back at the business session. Thanks for participating.